bro, I'm like, these guys are trying to fight me. I'm like, these guys are trying to jump me. I'm like, I'm not going to make it back to the room, man. Like, there's no way I win this fight. Like, I'm just going to get the shit kicked out of me for what? Like,
man, I ran.
What is going on, YouTube? Welcome back. This is part 3 in our segment that we are calling Cuba 2018.
Yep.
I'm here, joined as always with Max.
This is Ray.
And this has been Drunk Words, Drunk Thoughts, guys.
Man,
we'll try that again. Okay, guys. Hi, I'm Ray.
This is Max.
And this is Drunk Words, Drunk Thoughts, where we give you rants, we do advice, we do story time like this. We also do drinks. Mm-hmm. Segueing perfectly, Max, what are we drinking?
The Arizona Blackout. We're going to have the card right over here showing. Teach you how to do it. Pretty good drink. Disclaimer, there's a lot of alcohol in there.
A lot of alcohol. So if we're slurring, that is because this is part 3 of the segment. All right, so jumping right in. This one we're going to call Cuba 2018 part 3.
Part 3.
Trouble in Paradise, Max?
Yeah, that's a good time for it. It'd be cool because like basically the 2 point of views will kind of like segue with each other. So so my boy here was kind of giving eye to like this girl, but didn't know too much about her. We didn't know like where she was staying at inside the resort. So comes to find out that she's Russian, right? So I don't remember who you spoke to, but yeah, you picked up some words from them, and then you're like, "Hey, I need you to translate to me like a sentence." What was the sentence?
Okay. So let me interject, only for context.
Yeah.
I had an ex at one point. She was like half Russian, half something else. I think it was French. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is like years back. And she taught me a phrase, and that phrase was "Ya hachu tipia," and that basically means "I want you." That's the translation. Correct me in the comments below if it's not.
Fair.
And that's not what that means. But I was told the translation is basically "I want you," just like that with like a wink, basically.
There you go.
So go ahead.
Cool. So, so now, armed with that translation, he figures, hey, you know what? We don't know too much about this girl, so the way I'm gonna introduce myself is I'm gonna go to the bar, and then we were friends with the bartenders too, and then had one of them carry a drink, and I think it was vodka. Yeah.
Sure, it was vodka.
Okay, so vodka is being sent over there, and then obviously with the survey being like, okay, this guy over there, and then she smiles, so he's like, okay, I'm in. I'm like, okay, dope. So I'm kind of like looking at him like, okay, yeah, genius, And I think you end up like talking to this girl, right? If I'm not mistaken.
No?
Not right. Okay, fair. So we waited after. So we ended up being out. I don't think we went to the disco inside, but we went out in the city.
Yeah, we went out in the city with a group.
Okay.
We made a group and then we went out in the city.
We went out of the city.
I have one ankle at this point.
Yeah, so he's walking around with, because we went to the flea market, so he's walking around with like a cane and whatnot, has a little hat, so he has a real like pimp limp. Anyway, so but it was cool because he had his name on the cane and all. It was very nice.
It was a good cane.
It was a good cane.
Yeah.
So once we're back, and then we're kind of like in the lobby area, right? There's a bunch of tables, there's a bar right there. And then we notice, oh, okay, cool. This girl is still there, but then she's talking to like 3 guys there.
All Argentinians, yeah.
The Argentinians there. And then at that point, he's in. So he starts like talking. They kind of like separate themselves a bit from the 3. And then me, being me, I'm just like, oh, it's going well. Hey, man. Look, I'm going to go back to the room because we only had the one room for the 2 of us. I'm like, what I'm going to do is like kind of nap near the phone because if shit pops off, you can just like give me a quick call and then I can be like, cool, and I can run out and that way, it's clear. So I'm chilling, whatever, having a few drinks on my side. Then I start like almost passing out and then I get a call. Then Ray goes, yo, it's on. So me in my head, I'm like, oh, dope. Like, oh, my boy's about to get lit. Like, that's what I'm thinking.
He's thinking he's got to leave the room. That's what he's thinking.
Yeah. And I'm like, okay, it's on. Cool. Like, I'm leaving, whatever. So I leave. And then I'm like, okay, but like, and I'm kind of waiting from like afar. So I'm figuring, okay, I'm going to see you pass by. That way I know for a fact. Then I'm like, man, it's been like, I'm waiting. A minute goes by. 5 minutes goes by. And I'm like, that doesn't take that much time. So I end up going back into the room. Then the phone is just ringing off. And I pick it up again. And he's like, yo, like, it's on. Like we're about to fight. I'm like, oh, okay. Okay. Something different. And that's how I came about. But yeah, like, the side of the story there.
So when Max was in the room, basically, when we came back, it was this girl who I had already kind of been, like, throwing eyes at. She'd been throwing eyes at me. And we had been flirty throughout. But I didn't know her name. She didn't know my name. We didn't have a conversation yet. I didn't say those words to her yet or anything like that. I had sent her over the shot the night before.
Yeah.
And the second we distanced ourselves and Max went back to the room and she was still with this group of guys and they kind of like moved her further away and shit. And I was just chilling by myself having a drink. But like I was kind of talking to them, not necessarily talking to her, but talking to them.
Yeah.
And then they distanced themselves. So at this point, Max decides to go back to the room.
Yep.
I'm like, okay, no problem. I decide, hey, it worked before that I could send her a drink of vodka and I grab her attention. Why wouldn't it work again?
Yeah.
So I decide, okay, that's what I'm going to do. That's my play. That's my move because I've already done that move. She's comfortable with it, whatever.
Yep.
And I'm like, so again, hey, bartender, send her the shot. Tell her it's from me. So I order her the top shelf vodka that you got to actually pay for. So I pay like $6 or whatever it was for like a shot. And I'm like, send it to her.
Yeah.
So they sent it to her. Again, they're like, yo, it's from him over there. So she comes over. She's like, hey, thank you so much for the shot. I'm like, yeah, no problem. I have a shot with her. We cheers. And then I say those words to her. I'm like, yo. I say those words to her, and I'm like, yo, ya хочу тебя.
Yeah.
Her eyes light up. She's like, yo, you speak Russian and everything like that. And I'm like, that's the only phrase I know. I'm like, I'm sorry. She started trying to speak to me in Russian. I was like, that's the only thing I know, and I'm trying to explain to her in English. Yeah. We have like this language barrier or whatever going on.
Yeah.
And at this point, her friends, who are a lot better in English, who I guess were just trying to get after her as well, but weren't having any success, started explaining to me that this is their friend and I shouldn't be talking to her and everything like that. So now there's a little bit of a confrontation because I've explained to them, hey, like, it's cool. Like, me and her, like, we're cool. Like, you guys do you. But they explained to me that they've already gone out to the club with her that night and they have every intention of taking her home. And, like, I think this is what's lost on her because she's a little tipsy and she doesn't understand English. So the conversation we're having back and forth, me and these guys, is lost on her. Yeah. She just sees it as, like, okay, well, this dude's interested in me. It's clear that these three guys are interested in me. Right. I understand that there's some sort of confrontation going on. But, like, these guys are just being blunt. They're like, yeah, like, they're basically telling me, you can't sleep with that girl because we're going to sleep with that girl. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, but, like, I'm winning, though. That was kind of my logic. I was like, I'm winning because, like, at the end of the day, like, she's interested in me. So I'm like, what? I don't see the problem here. I'm like, you lost. Like, let's shake hands. Like, have a good night. Go somewhere else. Now, granted, it's like 3 a.m, almost 4 a.m. There's nobody in the lobby but us. Yep. There's that one bartender, and that's basically it. Yep. Like, there's nobody at the front desk. There's nobody anywhere. Nope. And Max is in the room. I've got one ankle from, if you watch part 2, you know why I have one ankle. I broke it riding a moped. Yep. And, like, I have a cane and I have my hat. Like, I'm like, that's it, man. So then these guys start getting heated and they, like, start trying to, like, chase me out of the lobby and stuff like that. So I'm like, you know what? Fuck this, man. I'm like, this girl's half in the bag anyway. I'm like, it would just be something if anything even popped off with her. So I'm like, not worth it. Not worth my time. All this shit. I'm like, I'm not fucking gonna be out here outnumbered on a bad ankle. It's not the right play. So I'm like, okay, no problem. I'm going to go home. Well, the one dude who's talking all the shit to me is the pussy in the background. And he's got two dudes that are fucking way bigger than him that are willing to be his pit bulls for him. Mm-hmm. That's how this is breaking down. So I proceed to start walking out the main entrance of our hotel back towards my bungalow where Max is. Well, doesn't one of these dudes just decide like, hey, you know what? It's on. Like, he's willing to beat me up with a bad ankle. He's already double my size, and I'm not a small guy. And I'm like, okay, I'm like, look, man, any other day we could do this dance. Like, I'll get thrown out of this hotel tomorrow. We could do this dance. But I'm like telling him, I'm trying to explain to him. I'm like, English isn't terrible, man. I'm like, I have one ankle, man. I'm like, my ankle's literally injured. Like, I'm like, this isn't a fair fight. I'm like, there's three of you and there's one of me. So then the guy explains to me that in his logic, what would make sense is if his other two boys don't fight me, the one that was starting shit with me in the first place doesn't fight me, and instead he'll just fight me one-on-one because then there's no numbers involved. I'm like, man, that's not how we're doing this. I'm like, what you need to understand is like, I will fight you, man. I'm like, but I'm not going to fight you when I have no fucking balance, I have no fucking ankle, and my entire left leg is cut up from falling off this moped. I'm like, it's not a fight I'm going to win. Like, there's no odds in my favor. This is like some Hunger Games shit. I'm like, I'm not doing this. So literally somehow I talk my way back into the hotel. I'm back in the lobby. They're back in the lobby. This dude's put his shirt back on, and they're all chilling. And I'm like, man, these guys aren't going to let me leave. They're just going to wait for me to leave. And then the second I'm not in the lobby, they're going to jump me because that's what they just tried to do. Yeah. I'm like, somehow I was able to talk my way out of that. I'm like, I don't know if I can do that a second time. So I go to the phone. That's when Max gets the ring. And he's like, oh, man, it's on? Okay, sick. Like, no problem. Like, I'm leaving the room, and hangs up. And I'm like, whoa, Max. Like, what do you mean? I'm continuing to call. Like 10 minutes later, I get him again. He's like, bro, like, why aren't you here at the room yet with the chick? I'm like, no. Bro, I'm like, these guys are trying to fight me. I'm like, these guys are trying to jump me. I'm like, I'm not going to make it back to the room, man. Like, there's no way I win this fight. Like, yeah. I'm just going to get the shit kicked out of me for what? Like,
man, I ran.
So this dude fucking runs. He guns from the hotel room all the way to the lobby where we are, shows up, out of breath, but looking fucking like jacked. Like, I don't know if this guy didn't push us before or whatever. So he shows up, he's looking jacked, and he's looking ready. Ready, right? Comes up through the back entrance to the lobby right in front of where these guys are sitting. So then I go over to him and I'm like, look, man, let's just fucking leave, bro. I'm like, I want to get out of here because I'm like, even with you here, we're still outnumbered, man. I'm like, we're doing this 3-on-2 shit. I'm like, literally, it's more like 3-on-1 because what the fuck am I going to do? Right. So now these guys want to talk. They just want to keep talking and chirping and chirping. And I'm like, no, we can talk, man. If you want to chirp, I'm like, I'll chirp you back. I don't give a shit about that. Then this big dude, I'll let you explain what the big dude says to you.
Oh my God. So as I show up, so this big dude there, so I'm watching everyone, and he's like, oh, okay. So he's speaking to Ray. He's like, oh, okay. So you brought in a guy that's my size, takes his shirt off. Okay, so we're gonna fight, right? And I'm like, fight for what? And he's like, yeah, because my friend's being disrespected by your friend. And then I'm like trying to gather the story and whatnot. And then basically what it was is because the smaller friend, liked the girl. And then what they did is that they were trying to like advance the situation by like being out with her every night. Mm. So it was like the third night in a row. And then that's what like got them pissed off because like they were trying so much, but then you came in and then like she didn't care about them anymore. And then he's like, okay, then we're going to fight. I'm like, I look at him. I'm like, okay, look, I have no issue fighting, but understand this. So we're going to fight over the fact that your friend can't talk to women. And then like, he's mad that my friend is better at getting girls. So as long as you understand that, we're fighting. So at this point, he kind of looks at me like, and he starts thinking like, yeah, so I'm going to fight over the fact that my friend sucks at women. I'm like, as long as you accept that fact, I have no issue fighting you. Starts thinks, he looks around, looks at his friend. And then at the end of the day, nothing happens. We kind of like look at each other. I'm like, yo, okay, like it's done. Like I'm done with this. As we like try to leave, like that little friend start like saying some shit still.
Yeah, he wants to chirp. He wants to talk, right?
Yeah. So we're like, no. It's like, no. Like it's like, oh, you guys are running away. I'm like, I'm not running away. I'm right here. So I'm right back to his face.
Literally, I start walking back. Like we have left. We're halfway down the steps now.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, run away like the pussies you are and shit like that. And I'm just like,
We're
all
just
right,
right
Max,
back up.
hold my cane. I'm like, I'll hobble back up these
We're
fucking
just
stairs.
right
I'm
back
like,
up.
I don't need to do this shit. Until this guy like eventually shut his mouth so we can fucking leave.
Yeah.
Like, and then we leave. The next morning, I'm like, nah, man, I can't do breakfast. Not after all that shit last night.
Yeah.
I'm like, that took all my energy, all my fucking focus to navigate the situation.
Guess what?
Shit. And then Max goes to breakfast. He's like, no problem. I'll get you a plate, man.
So here's what happens, right? So I go there, and then literally the two guys, right, are just staring. They're just looking. They're probably scheming, like being like, ah, yeah, he's alone now. Nah. So the entire time, me mugging me, and I'm just like, okay, like I'm looking on the side, like, okay, what are you gonna do? Like, you didn't do anything last night, so whatever, right? Like, and turns out I was grabbing like some waffles or whatever, and then like the taller dude was there, the bigger dude was there. So I go to him directly. I'm like, yo, man, it was a wild night yesterday. He's like, yeah, man, yo, like I'm hungover, like, oh man, I don't know, I need coffee. I'm like, all right, man. So we're good, right? He's like, yeah, all right. And I ended up grabbing your breakfast and then just leaving. And then nothing happened.
So moral of the story is, if you're hanging out with Argentinians on vacation, just don't.
Just don't.
Just don't. All right? Anyway, you know what? I think that concludes this little segment of story time for you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed part 1, part 2, and part 3. We'll have links right here down below.
Yep, for all 3 of them.
I am Ray.
This is Max.
And this is Drunk Words, Drunk Thoughts. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Please help us by subscribing. It helps us get to 100 subscribers. We're on our way there.
Yep.
Leave a comment below if this was fucking out of this world shit to you. Or if it's just, you feel like, it's nothing. You got a story or you've got a link to your video on your channel that you want us to come and see. We'll leave a comment there for you as well. Yep. In addition to that, please don't forget to hit and smash that like button. And what do we do to the notification bell?
We hit the bell. Let's go.
And just like that, guys, we're out.